by Gerald Groff and Randall Wenger, Chief Counsel with Independence Law Center, which is helping represent Mr. Groff. Mr. Groff is a former U.S. Postal Service employee who sued the agency for religious discrimination. The Supreme Court will hear arguments in his case on April 18th over the post office declining to accommodate Mr. Groff's religious observance of not working on Sundays due to his evangelical Christian faith. Package delivery 7 days a week became an issue, with the Postal Service contracting with Amazon to make deliveries on Sundays. At first, Mr. Groff had volunteers pick up his Sunday shifts, but when one wasn't available to fill the void, he would be penalized for not showing up to work. It eventually became such a problem that he had to resign in 2019. He sued over the Postal Service not accommodating his religious rights. The justices will decide to what extent an employer must accommodate an employee's religion. Mr. Groff and his attorney joined me to discuss the impact his case could have on all religions and employees' rights. Here is a bit from our interview.
Thank you for your time. I know you worked at the U.S. Postal Service for, I think it was, 7 years? And
Yeah.
From my calculations, you've been in this legal battle for at least 3. So how does it feel to finally have your case going before the justices?
It's amazing. I mean, strangely enough, that's going to be my first time that I'll be in the courtroom in this process because of what was going on with COVID. I was never in the courtroom for the district or federal level or the Third Circuit. It really was. This will be the first time I actually get to be part of it.
Is there anything specifically that you're hoping to hear in terms of from the justices, or do you feel like what is it that you want to gain from your lawsuit? Would you like your job back?
I'd have to consider what the post office, would offer as what they would think would be right, and then just take a look at that. Because right now I have a new job. I've moved on, in the 4 years since, and I'm content there. It's working with delivering the mail again at a local company with the retirement community. I have 300 mailroom volunteers who help me to deliver the mail for all the residents who live on a 250-acre campus. And so I enjoy doing that each day. So I'd have to think about whether it's a good idea for me to go back to the post office at this point.
Right. And then also, how did it feel essentially I'm sure it didn't feel good, but how did it feel with your religious accommodation not being met, being essentially pushed out of work?
It was truly a very difficult and painful experience. Early on in the process, my postmaster told me that they were thinking of skipping steps in the disciplinary process and jumping right from a letter of warning at the beginning to termination within a matter of weeks. And so I lived for what we now know is 2 years or so, but I lived that whole time, thinking today could be the day that you report to work and you're fired. So it was very difficult to get up each day and to report to the post office, thinking today could be the day I'm shown the door.
Yeah, no one wants to live with that sort of financial insecurity too. I mean, it's like an emotional stress, but also the unknown. I have my next question might be more of a legal question, but essentially there's a part of one of the court filings that mentioned that it cited the precedent in this realm, right? Trans World Airlines versus Hardison from 1977. And I think it said that there's at least 3 justices that have signaled that they want to revisit that. I don't know if y'all are familiar with what I'm referencing, but I'm curious, which justices do you have signal that they want to take a look at this case? I know in that case, the majority had ruled for the employer, saying that essentially they could deny religious accommodations so long as there's a de minimis cost, right? And doesn't create an undue burden to the employer's business. So I didn't know, I for my own interest and research, was there concurrences, dissents? Who should I be watching?
Yeah, there were dissents to denial of cert in a number of different cases, suggesting that there were justices that wanted to revisit that issue. One of the issues from Hardison was, we understand from Title VII that you're supposed to reasonably accommodate an employee's religious beliefs unless it's causing undue hardship. But the Hardison court wasn't looking at undue hardship the way that you would think based on the language of undue hardship, but said that anything more than a de minimis burden is undue hardship. That really ought not be the standard. And there's a number of justices that are looking at revisiting that.
Mm-hmm. And Also, have any of you been in touch with Mr. Hardison or his counsel in terms of like, I don't know how this works when you prep to go before the Supreme Court, but given that they've done this and what their outcome was, like kind of picked their brain to figure out, I guess, strategize your own case?
It's been a lot of years. 1977 was
right, 4 decades, I guess.
Yeah, but I know that First Liberty Institute had been in touch with Mr. Hardison.
Interesting. I know that the government argued in their brief that I guess there was evidence that the religious accommodation would have, in the way they worded it, I think caused disruption and disrupt workflow. I'm curious if that's like, is that even what based on precedent, I guess what you want the court to revisit, is that even what the court's supposed to look at?
Well, no. What the court should be looking at is whether there's undue hardship to the business itself. So significant difficulty or expense for the employer. And so one of the things that the Supreme Court is looking at is whether you can look at the effect on other employees as part of undue hardship. And it's our argument that that's really not what the statute says. That's not what the statute means. Mm-hmm. But I think more interesting than that are the actual facts of the case, where Gerald's experience with his coworkers was very positive. And I don't know if you want to comment on that, Gerald.
Sure. I mean, I actually had some of my fellow employees would approach me at times and tell me that, they can't believe the post office is doing this to me, that it's wrong. And I actually had people who were willing to work for me on Sundays that I was scheduled. They stepped up and said they'd be glad for the hours. So the idea that there was a problem in the office or whatever, right. I'm not aware of that. There was more of support.
Right. And you were able to take care of, I guess, your own replacement, it sounds like, it wasn't like it fell on somebody else, based on what you're saying.
Well, I was willing to do whatever I could to accommodate the post office in a sense. And if I was not going to work on Sunday, I would do everything I could to work the other 6 days of the week to support my coworkers. So, for example, on a Saturday, if we're short on a route, I would go do my full route and then go back and do even more by taking out another portion of a route, just to say, I may not work on Sunday, but I'm doing my part during the week. Or I would work on a holiday. Most people had to work every other holiday delivering Amazon parcels, but I would work every holiday. So if someone was thinking that I wasn't there on a Sunday, I could remind them that I worked Thanksgiving for them so that they were with their family that day.
Right. What about, I guess my last question would be, how big of a deal could this case be, not only to Christians observing Sundays, but employees of other faiths, I guess, that choose other days for their Sabbath? Does it impact religions? Would a ruling favorable to you impact all religions?
Yeah, a good ruling from the Supreme Court that's protecting the religious liberty of employees, it's going to help everyone. And think about it the way that you do with freedom of speech. Freedom of speech for the person next to you to be able to speak is your freedom to be able to speak. And the same is true with religious freedom and religious freedom in the workplace. And so having a standard in place that allows you to live out your faith in the workplace, it's going to benefit everyone.
Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that I didn't ask that you guys think need to be highlighted, either the facts of the case or in terms of the law that we haven't touched on?
I think it's colorful and interesting that this case arises out of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and you think of the Amish, you think of the Mennonites, and you think of a place where people of a whole lot of different backgrounds came together, recognizing the need to give each other space to be who they are. And that melting pot in Pennsylvania, the original vision that William Penn had for religious liberty, and that was grabbed hold by our founders, is the very issue that we have here. And now, since 1977, courts have been getting this issue wrong and really undercutting the ability of employees to be able to live out their faith in the workplace and to be able to just simply follow their conscience. And we're hoping that the Supreme Court takes a look at this case and restores religious liberty. It's interesting too that when Congress passed this law, one of the main things that was in view was the ability for people to be able to take off on a Sabbath. One of the senators was talking about how he took a Saturday Sabbath, and his expectation was that this statute was going to be able to help others like him to be able to not have to choose between following their faith and keeping their job. I think it's worth people understanding that Gerald was really a model employee, and the post office didn't gain anything by pushing him out. It's not like with Gerald gone, suddenly there are tons more people to be able to work on Sunday. Instead, they were able to make it work in the past. They were able to accommodate Gerald before they decided not to accommodate Gerald. We know that it could work because it did work, but what the post office is missing out on now is a really good employee who was willing to work every holiday, willing to do a shift and a half, willing to go out there in terrible weather and do whatever needed to be done. He was a model employee who got along with everyone. The post office is not in a better place, they're in a worse place, but that helps us to better understand, like, what do we do here in America? We just try to make things work for people. Unfortunately, the post office wasn't, but we've got a path forward. And if we breathe life back into this existing law, it'll be better off for folks like Gerald Groff being able to live out their faith in the workplace, so that there's that kind of give and take that makes it work for everyone.
The Supreme Court is expected to issue a ruling in Mr. Groff's case by the end of June. I'll have coverage of the oral arguments from the Supreme Court available on WashingtonTimes.com April 18th. Thanks for tuning in to the 7th episode of Court Watch. If you have not subscribed yet, please do so, and also feel free to email me interesting questions or topics you want explored about the legal reporting world. I'll do my best to answer them during each episode. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you all soon. Listen to my podcast, Court Watch, at WashingtonTimes.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.